So thank you so much, Bella. Our next talk is from Nathalie de Rocquigny, and it's going to be about infestation and behavioral trends of Cryptophlebia moth pests, Lepidoptera family Tortricidae, in commercial macadamia nut orchards in Hawaiʻi. So take it away.
Thank you, Noah, for your introduction. My name is Nathalie de Rocquigny. I'm a second-year master's student in the TCBES program, and I work at the USDA Agricultural Research Services. My talk today is on the infestation and behavioral trends of Cryptophlebia moth pests in commercial macadamia orchards in Hawaiʻi. Here are the topics that I'll be discussing today. So can you hear me okay?
We need to get a little closer. Yeah, perfect. Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay, so the first commercial planting of macadamia nut was in Keʻau in the 1950s. Since then, Hawaiʻi has been one of the leading producers of the most valuable tree nut in the world. In 2020, macadamia nut was valued at $48.8 million for Hawaiian production. In that same year, 17% of macadamia nuts were culled and unable to be processed at processing due to damage. Reasons behind the damage included insect damage, immature nuts, and moldy nuts. Some of the insects that attack macadamia nut the most in Hawaiʻi include the tropical nut borer, southern green stink bug, macadamia belted toxid, koa seabird, and lychee fruit moth. The koa seabird and lychee fruit moth complex are estimated to be responsible for up to 18% of damage. However, this number is an underestimate, as it doesn't account for losses incurred in the field prior to processing. The koa seaworm, Cryptophlebia ellipida, and the lychee fruit moth, Cryptophlebia ombrodelta, will be collectively referred to as Cryptophlebia and the focus of this presentation. These are small and dark moths who are the biggest fruit and seed pod borers. Although they are different species, they act the same and have the same life cycle. Adult moths lay their eggs on the husk of macadamia nuts. When the neonates emerge, the larvae bore into the husk and create a hole where they will feed on the inside of the husk. If the shell has not been formed at this time, the larvae may penetrate and continue to eat inside the kernel. Otherwise, they will just feed in between the shell and the husk. Cryptophlebia have several alternate hosts in Hawaiʻi that they can use to create when they finish their life cycle. Cryptophlebia are not currently managed in Hawaiian macadamia nut orchards, as producers have limited options and knowledge for this moth pest.
No, that's my fault now.
Thank you. That brings us to our knowledge gaps. It was not known the influence and spatial distribution of Cryptophlebia. These moths have not been widely studied in the past 20 to 30 years. Therefore, their seasonality trends could be revisited. As mentioned earlier, Cryptophlebia use alternate hosts, and we know by looking at other polyphagous insects, like the brown marrated stink bug, that percent injury was found to be greatest on the exterior of the orchard. This was the last paper to discuss seasonality trends of Cryptophlebia in 1992. The objectives of the study were to observe spatial and temporal trends of Cryptophlebia. We wanted to know if there was a difference between the exterior and the interior of the orchard for this moth pest in regards to oviposition, nut injury, and moth population. As for temporal trends, we wanted to update the information on the seasonality in regards to oviposition, nut injury, and population across the 6-month-long macadamia growing season, May through October. We had 2 sites for this study located in Hawaiʻi Island, near the towns of Keʻau on the east and Kapa'au on the north side. Keʻau is on average 2 degrees Celsius hotter than Kapa'au, and their average rainfall is approximately the same. This is an aerial picture of our Keʻau orchard block, depicting where the trapping and nut sampling locations were. The yellow symbolizes the exterior treatment, which is closest to the ultimate hosts. And this is our Kapa'au field site. Moving on to the methodology, this study comprised of 2 parts, the nut infestation assessment and the adult moth trapping. Nuts were sampled from both the tree and the ground across the 6-month-long macadamia nut growing season, May through October. Nuts picked from the tree were to represent oviposition, and nuts picked from the ground to represent injury. Nuts picked from the lower canopy of the tree were 22 to 28 millimeters in diameter. That is Cryptophlebia known size preference for oviposition. And nuts picked from the ground were green and freshly fallen. There were 6 sampling areas consisting of approximately 3 to 4 trees, which served as replicates for both the interior and the exterior treatments. At each replicate, 20 nuts were picked from both the tree and the ground once a month for the 6-month-long period. Nuts were assessed for oviposition, nut injury, and presence of larvae and pupae. Adult moth trapping occurred concurrently with nut sampling. We used white delta traps baited with sex pheromone lures to capture these moths. These lures were tested by our lab in a previous study and were known to be attractive to Cryptophlebia. For both interior and exterior treatments, we had 4 trapping trees which served as replicates. At each replicate, each tree served with 3 traps, one with an OFM lure, MMB lure, and no lure for negative control. These traps were checked bi-weekly across the 6-month sampling period, where the sticky liners at the bottom of the trap containing the moths were replaced and brought back to the lab for species identification. Koa seedworm and lychee fruit moth males can be morphologically distinguished from each other by looking at characteristics in their hind leg. The lychee fruit moth has a black spot and the Koa seedworm does not. These methods were applied at both of our sites. Looking at the results into our spatial trends, which were analyzed using mixed model in JMP. In KL, lychee fruit moth populations were significantly higher on the exterior of the orchard. For the Koa seedworm, however, we did not see a difference between the interior and the exterior of the orchard. In Kappa Owl, populations of the lychee fruit moth are found to be higher on the interior of the orchard. For tree and ground collected nuts in K. Owl, the mean hatched eggs were found greater on the exterior of the orchard. In Kappa Owl, only tree collected nuts showed significance on the exterior of the orchard or hatched eggs. In K. Owl, the amount of holes on the exterior of the orchard were significantly higher than the interior. And similar to K. Owl, Kappa Owl also had greater amounts of holes per nut on the exterior of the orchard. And looking results in our temporal trends that were analyzed using generalized regression. In K. Owl, we had populations of the lychee fruit moth and the Koa seedworm peak at 2 different times. The population of the lychee fruit moth was greatest in July, and in September for the Koa seedworm. Mean relative humidity was greatest in July, which indicates that there were higher amounts of precipitation for that period. Notice that in July, we also had the higher amounts of lychee fruit moth. Possible explanation is because water vapor traps scent molecules, and sex pheromones could have been more concentrated for that period of time. Mean temperature varied throughout the season by approximately 2 degrees Celsius. In Kappa Owl, the population of lychee fruit moth was greatest in June, and we did not receive enough Koa seedworm trap captures to warrant any comparison throughout the season. Mean relative humidity varied throughout the season. Mean temperature varied throughout the season and increased up until August when it was the highest. In K. Owl, June had the highest amounts of newly laid and unhatched eggs for tree collected nuts. And in Kappa Owl, although not statistically significant, May had the highest amounts of newly laid and unhatched eggs for tree collected nuts. In K. Owl, the mean percent injury for tree collected nuts was greatest in August, and in May and June for the ground collected nuts. In Kappa Owl, the percent injury was greatest in June for tree collected nuts, and in May and June for ground collected nuts. The low trap captures of Koa seedworm made it difficult to detect any trends at both locations. This is opposite of Vince Jones' findings, who noted that approximately 20 to 30 years ago, macadamia nut orchards here in Hawaii were comprised mainly of the Koa seedworm, and that the lychee fruit moth was the species found in much lower population. So the lychee fruit moth was found to be greatest on the exterior of the orchard in K. Owl, but on the interior of the orchard in Kappa Owl. Kappa Owl had on average 8 times more moth. Although in Kappa Owl there were greater populations on the interior, oviposition and nut injury were generally greatest on the exterior of the orchard for both locations. Alternate hosts may provide an explanation for this finding. Newly laid and unhatched eggs were found to be greatest in June and May, and that suggests that Cryptophlebia can oviposit earlier in the season. There wasn't any data collected prior to May for the study, And I think that if we started looking earlier in the season, before the growing season, we could find some information. Vince Jones found that there was some activity in February, and knowing this would help determine the position in that injury rates prior to May. In conclusion, this study has provided macadamia nut growers with more information on which areas of their orchard are more vulnerable to attacks by Cryptophlebia, and when during the season their crop is the most susceptible. Here's everyone that I would like to acknowledge. My references. I want to thank everyone in the Kaineo Club for organizing this event. And I can take some questions now.
I've got one for you. Yeah. So is there a difference in the peak fruiting time between mac nuts and lychee that could be affecting the hosts and the peak abundance, their own phenology differently?
Yes, thank you, Noah, for your question. He was asking about the different flowering times for lychee and for mac nut. So you probably can tell by the lychee fruit moth's name that lychee is actually one of its hosts. And yes, so these moths have several alternate hosts that are attracted to them. Mango and coconut are some of them, and those were found in our Kapa'au site. If we go back to the Ke'au orchard pit, the alternate hosts that I'm talking about are, oh, you don't have to, it's okay. Anyways, the site across from here. This is all lychee. This is a lychee farm. So basically, Vince Jones has taken a look at the effects of alternate hosts on Cryptophlebia. And so that's why one of the things I wanted to look at was the exterior and see, is that where I'm looking at more infestation, and that was correct. And so yes, flowering periods for lychee are slightly different than for macnut. And so the thing with macnut is that it actually flowers continuously over the year here in Hawaii, but May through October is when it's mainly growing, is when you're going to see that actually growing. However, there are nuts all year round. And the thing with when there aren't that many nuts, that's when they can bounce back to lychee, and they can bounce back to their other, they have up to I think 20 known hosts.
Thank you.
Are either of these insects native, or are they both
Yes. Sorry, I must have forgotten that part in my talk. So the lychee fruit moth is native to Australia, and the Proacetum is actually endemic to Hawaii. Thank you. Oh, yes. Farms, there's probably different species. It's a higher concentration along in the exterior interior. Yes. So in Ke'au, so at this site we have higher amount on the exterior orchard. But here in Kapa'au, they were found greater to be in the interior. The reasons why, there could be several possible explanations, but one thing is that Kapa'au had 8 times more moths than Ke'au, and that could be because along this, it's a ravine, and there's actually several different species. Mango and coconut are the ones that we know are attracted to Cryptophlebia. But I just want to mention that this site here, or this specific farm, is organically managed, and they do not spray any pesticides, as opposed to the Ke'au site is conventionally managed.